Welcome again, my friends, to the Fat Man GM's revisitation of the Middle Earth role-playing game system, also known as ERP, created by Iron Crown Enterprises. Please excuse me if you're experiencing any sound or motion issues at the moment. It is a nice little thunderstorm going on outside, so that's rain hitting the roof of the RV, making that pattering noise. The wind's coming and going. It doesn't seem to be overly severe. In addition to that, I am also on my table, which has a very nasty habit of jiggling. So whenever I move, because it's once again an RV table, and that's just part of the price to pay for dealing with the situation and conditions that my wife and myself and the fat cat have to deal with. So that said, this is the Fat Man. This is Mount Gundabad. I'm sure anybody who's seen the movie, especially the Hobbit trilogy, has heard of Mount Gundabad and a few others. And this is always been an interesting location. I have utilized this particular source book for decades as a go-to for any really truly large humanoid city, specifically orcs, but it can also apply for goblins. It makes for a very good quick grab if you need to improvise. There are some significant differences between this, of course, and anything in the movies and or maybe even in the books, because once again, these people were just taking something that's very briefly mentioned in the novels and creating an entire source book from around it. As typical for Iron Crown Enterprises, they have a couple pages up here and giving you your definitions, or if you're not familiar with things like Agmar or the Dunedain or the Eldar or the Mirkwood or whatever, you've got your little cues. You also got your conversion system for adapting this to pretty much any dice system you choose to use. I suppose you could use it with a non-dice system, but that would be on you to come up with the conversions for it. The introduction, locks, traps. And it says here, it is a place where the sun rarely shines. Storm clouds perpetually shroud this bleak corner of the north, mingle with the fumes of a ceaseless burning from the depths of the earth, as though to hide a great evil from the watchful eyes of valor. The junction of the mighty Missy Mountains and the dragon-haunted slopes of the Gray Mountains rises a solitary triple-spired creek, brooding over the forsaken lands and commands crossings between civilized Iridor and wild Rohirrian. Anyway, you get the idea. For over 4,000 years, as men reckon, has passed since the orcs first came to Mount Gundabad, fleeing the ruin of Morgoth's domain. Long have they labored here, and now the colossal mountain is a honeycomb with their tunnels, caverns, and mines, swarming with orcs in the thousands. Mount Gundabad is a veritable city of orcs, a ghastly perversion of the centers of mannish, elvish, and dwarven culture. It is the capital of the orcs of the mountains, their most feared citadel, and a mustering place for their enormous war hosts, and the throne of their tyrannical overlord who owes allegiance only to the Witch King Agmar. Mount Gundabad, though a tributary to Agmar, is in truth a realm in its own right, supplying Agmar with orcish levies for its armies and an abundance of weaponry and war engines from its huge complex of armory, shelters, and forges, whose soot blackens the northern sky. Blah, blah, blah. Gundabad is rife with intrigues, violence that can be met in any great city. Here, though, things are not aberrations from the norm, frowned upon by the authorities, but an accepted fact of everyday life. Behind the spires of Gundabad, the powerful Orc-lords scheme and loot strewn halls, plotting for further rivalries and ambitions and assassinations and so on and so forth. And now the wind's kicking up, and the sounds maybe even worse. So we'll see. I'll make the video anyway and decide whether or not it's salvageable. We talk about the coming of the orcs. The fall of the Bellerad and the mighty destruction of, what is it, the end of the first age, the wrath of avenging valor shattered the unnumbered legions of Morgoth, and his armies of orcs were scattered like straw in the winds of a storm, yet not all perished. While the host of the west sought Morgoth, some of his orcish minions fled into the east, seeking refuge far from the power of their foes. One such orc band was captured by Morgoth's rusted general Skorg. Terrible in battle and matched even for a noble elf, Skorg feared nothing less than a Balrog, and his fierce will drove his followers on for months through the icy wastes of the Fortalaith. Yet many fell on the wayside, and it was with only 40 score orcs, counting females and imps, that Skorg approached the arid Merthern at the north. From the north as the winter drew near, i.e. the guy that settled the damn place, right? Originally, there's a small dwarvish citadel and mining operation have been established here. It says, beneath the mountain surface, the orcs carved and expanded unshaped fissures, and the dwarves' rudimentary halls into an intricate and ever-growing network of tunnels and caverns. So it gives us a little bit of history. Then we talk about the rise of Agmar and Mount Gundabad after the third age, 1640. Like I've said in previous reviews, the games are set in a play area of approximately 1640, which is about 1,000 years before the War of the Ring, when a lot of these entities and communities that in the later millennia have been turned to ruins are still in some form of activity. So you can visit Tharbad, you can go to Arthade, you can be involved in the petty wars of Arnor and the war against the evil Agmar and the Witch King and other things. And Gondor is doing quite successful for itself, up and down depending on the timeline. Although I think in 1640 they're dealing with the kinstrife and some fallout from some political issues that's keeping them busy and unable to help Arnor when it needs it most. At the current moment, anyway. So we talk about Mount Gundabad after 1640 and after when Agmar is finally brought down and the Sauron recalls his lieutenant. The lands, Mount Gundabad itself, the climate in the area, the flora. That's another thing I've always liked about Iron Crown, and especially MERP, is they go out of their way to give us samples of what the weather and environment's like in the neighborhood, and what typical plants and animals that would be likely to be found. So here's fungal growth of Gundabad. I've used this a number of times in D&D campaigns as a go-to for things that you can find growing in underground caverns, other than the handful of things that you find in some of the monster manuals and other sorted books. Fauna, of course, a few things that we're familiar with, and a lot of things we're not. And then we got a big section on the orcs themselves. Orcs talks about their parents and their abilities and weaknesses, their attitudes and lifestyles, their social structure. But talk about sound effects, right? Violence and fear seem in Orcish society. A goblin community, when not under the direct control of the Dark Lord, is an uneasy grouping of tribal units. In the case of an Orcish city such as Mount Gundabad, there can be numerous smaller factions and tribes within the larger society, often feuding with one another and held together only by the will of a strong leader. So it's an ugly thing in these places. So we talk about the life of the young orcs known as imps, raised jointly by older females who are no longer suitable for mating. The imps only know their fathers. This unbalanced brain accentuates the masculine oriented toward aggressiveness, combat, and heavy labor, at the expense of any remnants of love or tenderness. The Orcish imp caves, worse than the most horrid managed orphanages, quickly teach the young orc that survival is won by craftiness and brute force. From the start, male imps are favored, commencing a lifetime of pattern that reduces the female orc to little more than a chattel. The weakest of the imps are devoured so that they do not burden the community. Talk about rough growing up. The economy. And a man or dwarf, who values wealth for trade, or an elf who treasures precious things for their inherent beauty. The economy of orcs seems perverse, if not incomprehensible. Orcs do not labor for pay, nor for pleasure of creating with their hands or minds, but at the compulsion of their overlords, who allot the goblins whatever victuals and goods are necessary to sustain their perpetual toil. Goblin folks seem to treasure. See, now there's something to keep in mind. They make a lot of references of orcs and goblins being the same thing. Although, if you look at the movies, and I tend to believe that too, but there's a huge difference between the goblins and orcs. Although there's been a debate on social media in the past few years since the movies come out that the very much more maligned and diminutive and weaker looking goblin species is just some sort of subspecies of orc that's been more or less kept in the condition they are for various reasons. I still think they're different races, and I cling to that mindset. Maybe it's because that's how the old school things have always looked at. Talk about their language, religion, trolls, in relation to trolls, and living with the orcs in the area. And after orcs, trolls are most common denizens of the Gundabad region. Here they lurk in their all the diverse and hideous breeds. Blah blah blah. It says, fortunately for other folk, trolls are never especially prolific, in large part due to the scarcity of trollish females. Most frequently they are encountered alone in small hunting bands. And we talk about the Northmen. These would be the predecessors of the Rohirrim to some degree. You can see that bit of a look there they kind of give you, so you can kind of get that Rohirrim Northman Neo-Scandinavian look. Population, politics, the hierarchy of the citadel. Mount Gundabad in the middle of the Third Age, circa 1640, is home to about 12,600 orcs, making it by far the largest center orc population in the north, nearly 5 times as densely inhabited as the next most sizable community in the Musty Mountains. Gobblingate is truly a goblin city. Indeed, its population is greater than such centers of managed culture in Fornos reign. See, that's once again a bit of a confusion, because we know Gobblingate is a different city, a different citadel, if you will. So of these orcs, the vast majority are common sort, numbering 5,800 adult males, 3,700 adult females. Blah. Makes you wonder who took the effort to make a census and how they managed to get them to sit still long enough to be counted, because you know the goblins or the orcs don't really want to be counted. If somebody counts and numbers you, then you know your days are numbered, because they're going to do something terrible to you. Hierarchy of the capital. Citadel, orcish tribes of the mountains. So we deal with the various, it's not just the orcs that live here, but the entire region is saturated with independent tribes that all owe their allegiance to the overlord of the mountain. At one point or another, it says here, comprising a total of over 30 tribes, all owe some degree of allegiance to the Asherbark in Mount Gundabad, enforced by the Orc-lords of the monarch's command, and less overt but more terrifying power of the Witch King. It says the land subject to the orcs are widely scattered. 1/3 of the goblins subservient to Asherbark dwell in the western Agmar. Blah blah blah. And then it goes down individually, breaks down a couple of the big ones. The 4 main tribes that inhabit Mount Gundabad itself are in competition with each other. Mount Gundabad and Agmar and its relationship, the military forces of the Orcish nation. Various types of military units. Each soldier belongs to one of 100 lurgs that are grouped into 10 Zahari, each with a. So I imagine it's 10 by 10, not unlike the Roman Legion kind of setup. It's not exactly specific here. There might be a section somewhere else that does more specific. And we got the Royal Hurric, the Lesser Hurrics, the Night Nosers, the Troll Guard, the Siege Train. The Night Nosers. This unit consists of approximately 190 common orc trackers, highly trained scouts and thieves under the command of the Swaymaster. These elite trackers are never used for general melee combat, being too valuable to waste. Indeed, they are reserved for reconnaissance, ambush, infiltration of enemy camps, to assassinate opposing generals, all missions to which they excel. The Night Nosers also serve as informers within the host of Gundabad, revealing traitors and dissenters to the monarch. Elite trackers are indistinguishable from ordinary orc trackers in their uniform of leather armored dark cloak and soft-hatted leather boots, and in their arms. Each noser, however, carries a concealed silver emblem of the Triple Peaks of Gundabad, which identifies him as the servant of the Goblin King. Beware, of their weapons are always poison-coated. Healers and priests. You would think they would very care about the healers. A contingent of 40 healers and 15 priests of darkness stand ready to serve the host of Gundabad at any time. They do not join in combat, remain behind the lines of battle, or cloistered in the safety of the citadel. The severely wounded are dragged to the hospital tents or carted back to the mountain by the less damaged comrades. The healers and priests are never placed in physical jeopardy. 5 healers are assigned to each horse, and the remainder kept at the disposal of the Goblin King. The priests of darkness are subservient to the high priests of Mount Gundabad, and fewer ever actually leave their lair. Various craft rings. Among the common orcs of Mount Gundabad, the greatest respect is given to members of expert craft rings. Orcish master crafts, but the craft rings are guilds charged with the equivalent of an Orcish guild. And so, makes sense. Iron binders, fire makers, armorers, weapon makers, brewers, butchers, stone shapers, four-sided ones, pain bringers. An overview of the Mount Gundabad itself. Nice little distant picture of it. Orcish architecture is characterized by low passages, difficult for any creature much taller than a dwarf to negotiate without uncomfortable bending. The Urkai run in loping crouch, skill acquired by long practice, which does not impede them from the least. They got that apish kind of gait and run to them. There's the picture of the Drake Gate, or the main entrance. Nice and imposing, right? Adventures in Goblin City. Messages to the rebels. So now we got some various encounters or adventure modules, and it to be said that it's not impossible for humans to be in Gundabad for various reasons. Of course, they're going to find themselves being harassed and harangued and threatened on a regular, probably moment for moment basis the entire time they're there. But if they have permission from certain high lords or the Goblin King himself, with all that requires, then they have reason, or they'll be more or less left intact to do their business. I don't think any of them are going to live long term there, but to come in and do various merchant and or mission kind of things is not unreal. Plus, the Orc-lords are not adverse to hiring mercenaries to carry out their will, because mercenaries tend to be a little bit more smarter than the average orc. It says, Mount Gundabad affords one of the Middle-earth's most hilarious challenges to our adventurers, as well as the most profitable or exciting opportunities. The dangers are evident. Over 6,000 orcish warriors, backed by trolls, wargs, monsters, and the array of powerful Orc-lords ward the city around the Goblin King. Further, these living foes are aided by the maze-like design of the subterranean fortress packed with traps for the unwary, blah blah. So, we got a message to the rebels. It says, requirement: a group of adventurers of low to moderate level. At least some of the party should have fought orcs and explored smaller orc lairs before. One or more dwarves and scouts will prove useful. Player characters aligned towards... Yeah, I want to bring dwarves into an orcish anything. I don't see how that's a good idea. The plot. King Thundril, Lord of the Wood Elves, and Mirkwood has learned from an elf who recently escaped captivity in Mount Gundabad. A small band of rebels currently wage a struggle against the orcs in the pits, and he wants to Operation the Breaking of Dawn, another mission. Hardy adventures of moderate to high level. Dwarves and scouts especially useful. Now this would be a mission why you'd want to bring dwarves, because everybody knows how they love to smash orcs. They're good at it. West is hostile amongst Mount Gundabad, the Witch King, and indirectly Sauron. Only the characters oriented toward the free peoples will likely accept it readily. The party is basically going to go in and smash a very big, very ugly battering ram. And totally unlike, I guess this one's a variant of a dragon's head, and compared to the wolf's head they use that the orcs of the Dark of Mordor use against the gates of Minas Tirith at the War of the Ring. Orcies to love, if you want to call it that. Three Kings in Gundabad. This venture should only be undertaken by characters of moderate to high level. Virtually anyone that can participate in a mission, though the elves will be badly received in Mount Gundabad under any circumstances. And I imagine dwarves would be too. I mean, I'm just saying. Right? Apparently, they're more tolerant. Which is, well, long smoldering discontent in Mount Gundabad concerning the conduct of the Goblin King has been seen increasingly dominated by his consort. Has finally exploded in open warfare and rebellion. Yeah, well, for orcish women, I imagine she's quite a looker. Not saying that to insult anybody. I'm just saying, guys need help. Really, seriously, truly need help. Operation Overview, principal characters, various various orcish NPCs that you got to deal with. You know, this was a mission that I actually tried to run once, and I think the group made it 3 sessions before they ended up getting killed and eaten. They were served high dinner. They were the main course. Anyway, items of power. Most potent items, things that you can find potentially in Mount Gundabad if you look into them. Potent items. Largest items. Now we get the layout. See, I gotta work on figuring out how to place this thing. This still seems to be a little too high. Yeah. Nobody wants to see my cat belly, so I'm gonna be careful about that. And still working on figuring out how to place these things right. The cutaway of the mountain. Next major Mongol caves, the mines, blah blah blah. Traps, shifting walls, murder pits, closing pits, poison bolts. I've used a number of these traps in D&D campaigns. Here's our colorful map of the region. This is one of the few that retained in the MERP books. I had learned in some years after that just whenever possible, leave the books, the maps and stuff where they belong. Instead, I've lost a few. Most of them are piled up in a folder up here in the overhead above me. But I've always liked maps in general, and Ironcran's maps for Middle Earth are really colorful, in my opinion, very well designed, and I've tried to emulate this stuff in my own map making over the years as much as I can. I can't say it doesn't vary, some or not, but just looking at the location of Mount Gundabad, you can see why it is such a strategic location. Even though we're in a far north central Middle Earth, if you will, in a section that's not known to have huge human cities or civilizations, but there's lots of dwarven communities and smaller human cities and so on and so forth. But this being a major entrance to the north waste, the divide between the two major mountain chains, and a number of pathways that gets over to Arnor, the nearest pathway from there would be the ones clear down here near Goblin Gate. Lamorous is right here, so you got Rivendell hidden down in here. very, while remote, important strategic location, and one that's been under the control of the Dark Lord's minions for many, many years. Great gate, main entrance, all the surrounding what have yous. We got the great spire. You can see just how elaborate this system is. And like I said, I have borrowed this on a few occasions to as improvised underground works. All I did was change the names and some of the content issues to adapt it to whatever I needed, or I borrowed just sections of it and Xerox them out. Cloven spire, the twisted spire, the pits. Since the pits are so extensive, there's not every location individually described, blah, blah. This whole thing is just like Moria in some aspects. It's almost a twisted copy of Moria, the huge dwarven capital and citadel of the Misty Mountains, and the largest dwarvish community created by far. And this makes Mount Gundabad the Orcish equivalent thereof, and just like it, there's so much there. It's not possible for any one source book or a dozen source books to document everything. So they give you samplings and then examples. And it's on you to deal with it the best you can, and or in interesting ways. So here we go, the fungi caves, the pits, the mines, an Orcish guard tower. Then we talk about Mount Gundabad at other times, Third Age 2940. This year, nearly a century and a half since the Dwarvish sack, and only a short while before the Battle of 5 Armies, Mount Gundabad, as powerful it was during its days as a client state of Agmark, where the population figures would be regarded. There's something of interest, and this comes up a few times in the book or the novels, but specifically, or the movies, but more specifically, and there's a mention, Gandalf brings it up someplace in the novels, but in the game system, it's discussed a couple times too. But had the Battle of 5 Armies not taken place 30 odd years before, 50 years before the War of the Ring, and I think it's 50 years, the sheer number and power of the Orc armies of the North would have dominated the region during the War of the Rings, and it would have drawn away resources from Gondor and Rohan, and at a critical time when they were needed to fight Sauron and his main host coming out of Mordor. So there was other ulterior reasons for Gandalf, who knew by encouraging Thorin and Oakenshield and company to get rid of, to do something about smog, and hopefully, he didn't have some great vision that they were going to easily overcome this venerable red dragon, and I mean, they succeeded behind his wildest dreams, but the fact that they eliminated smog, which would have been a huge tool in the hands of the Sauron, and diminished incidentally through the Battle of the 5 Armies, the lion's share of the bulk of Mount Gundabad and the Northern Orcs community's warrior class. It meant that they had far less of an impact 50 years later when War of the Rings break out. And it's only briefly mentioned in the back of the third book, Return of the King, and some of the attachments. There's mentioned where the elves of the Wood Elves are fighting Northern Orc, and the Wood Elves combine with Galadriel's forces out of Lothlorien to attack, sack, and destroy the I'm trying to think of it off the top of my head. The Necromancer's lair in Mirkwood. There's also elements of northern communities defending and attacks from heavy raids from the orcs of the mountains. Rivendell's never attacked because they can never. The orcs have never been able to find Rivendell, but the Marinings and a number of others participated. Northmen or whatever participate in some conflicts. Erebor is engaged. The dwarves of Erebor is engaged in some forces from the east, and it's because of these outfits that those communities were unable to send help to the battles at Gondor. And even if they'd arrived in time, it was debatable, but there was reasons why, political reasons, but realistic reasons why they were never able to respond to Gondor's call for need and for any efforts thereof, because they were dealing with this sort of problem. But it would have been a much worse problem had the Battle of 5 Armies not taken place. That's just my opinion. Then we got First Age 1, beginning of the Fourth Age 1. Beginning of Fourth Age 1, Gundabad has fallen on hard times, lost 3/4 of its hosts at the Battle of 5 Armies. See, devastated. We're not fully prepared when surrounding the War of the Ring demanded the goblins marched invasions into Thranduil's kingdom and Merc went into the lands of the Baronies Woodman. See there, I just basically told you what I told you. So, there you have it. Dol Gundor. Right. As a matter of fact, here's a political map that even talks about that stuff, where we got Bol's attack on Erebor, and then Orc campaign in early Third Age Thranduil's campaign versus Gundabad in late 3019. So basically, while all the fighting going on down in Gondor, we've got fighting going on here. The Grey Mountain Dwarf holds, that was much earlier. Earthhead lands, or former Rohirrim. Height of a Zog's Mountain Kingdom. Core Shadow. Anyway, so you can see that. We got a Master Beast table. Random features table. Always like these extra little things because it gives me ideas for creating and world building on my own campaigns. There you have it. Master NPC tables, master military tables, and I know I say this in almost every review. I say the same thing. I've always liked these master NPC tables because I can Xerox this copy. I used to carry a folder, a little binder with a bunch of these already picked out, and it just gave me this huge encyclopedia, this huge directory, if you will, of ready-made NPCs and or minor encounters, and I only needed to adapt it slightly to whatever game system I was running. So there was an old product listing: Roll Master, Space Master, Middle Earth, Champions. Never got into Champions. My friend Gilson really did, but I never did. Danger International, Fantasy Hero, blah blah. There you have it. We got Mount Gundabad in a visual down view, and I hope you've enjoyed our little visitation.